All right, guys, look, big story on the front page of most of the newspapers tomorrow. And, of course, I talk about the Australian, the Telegraph, the Courier Mail, the Sydney Morning Herald, and that is we've got a problem in this country with our education. And the latest results show a damning indictment on our education system. Let's have a debate about how this, the authorities, the education authorities, certainly the education ministers, the COAGs, you know, the state ministers and the federal ministers get together and sort this out. First of all, let's go to the Oz. Schools fail on maths and science. Our 15-year-olds plunge in global rankings. Students 3.5 years behind the Chinese, and $20 billion in extra funding makes little difference. And Jennifer Buckingham, writing in the Oz, says Australia started near the top of the table in the first PSA cycle in 2000 and is now closer to the middle. If we head to the front of the Courier Mail, headline there, nose dive, maths down 29th in the world, science down 17th in the world, reading down 16th in the world. Australia's global education rankings, Australian schools are failing our students, with a major new international report showing we are falling years behind the rest of the world in literacy and numeracy. I will get to the Telly and the Sydney Morning Herald in a second, guys, but first up, Matt Cunningham, this is really challenging news for this country because, you know, our kids are our future. If we can't educate them properly, if the Chinese are so far in front of us at the same age, it's incredibly alarming.
Well, I would say it's a wake-up call, Gleeso, except this is something that we've known has been coming for a long time, and today it's hitting us right in the face. I mean, this is, you know, an absolute debacle, you'd have to say, here in Australia. The fact that this is happening in a country like ours is a major concern. You know, consider the billions and billions and billions of dollars we've thrown at education in this country in the past decade, and yet we are going backwards. I think we need to have a real rethink about the way we're doing things. Something's clearly not going wrong in the classroom, but I don't think we should just be putting the blame on our education system and on the schools themselves, Glee. So, I mean, you know, you remember the catch cry back in the 1980s that we were the lucky country and we had to become the clever country. Well, I reckon that starts at home, and I reckon there are a lot of parents out there who also have to take a good hard look at themselves and say, well, what are you doing at home with your kids? Are you teaching them to read? Are you doing your homework with your kids? Are you trying to get the best out of them? Because I can tell you, that's what the parents of those Chinese students are doing. That's what the parents of those Singapore students are doing. And that's another reason why we're slipping so far behind.
Very well said, Matt Cunningham. Caleb, let's have a look while you're chatting at the Daily Telegraph. Dumb down under, education system failing our kids. Now, this is a statistic that should really alarm educationists and, of course, parents. Maths literacy. Students who attain national proficiency standard in China, 91%. In Australia, 54%. If we go to the front of the Sydney Morning Herald, nation students slide in rankings, and as you can see there, certainly in New South Wales, now below the OECD average when it comes to maths knowledge. Australian students have recorded their worst results in international tests, failing for the first time to exceed the OECD average in maths, while also tumbling down global rankings in reading and science. Caleb, your thoughts?
Well, I think this proves that, you know, for years and years and years we've been chucking more and more money at education. The Teachers Union has consistently told us that we need more money for teachers, we need more money for the education system to boost results, to make things work better, and all we've got for all this extra money we have spent is a failing system that costs even more money. It is clear that it is not about how much money is spent on education. We've tried that and it has failed abundantly. What we have now is a system that costs billions and billions more dollars than it did back in 2003, and in that time, through our falling results, we have essentially lost, this report is saying, a year's worth of education, because all we're doing is throwing more money at a failing system. It doesn't help the country, it doesn't help the students, it doesn't help their employment prospects. It doesn't help our economy. I mean, the ramifications of this seriously cannot be understated. And I think we really need to look at a serious rethink of how our education system works, not just about whether we can allocate money better, but actually going back, paring things right back and saying, OK, what is China doing? What are other countries doing? If we're slipping in the OECD rankings to the point where you've got a whole bunch of Asian and subcontinental countries that don't have economies as big as ours, I mean, places like Vietnam, for instance, now have better education rankings than us. And if that's happening, we need to look at what they're doing and what we can do to emulate that. And Matt raises a good point as well, which is where are the parents in all of this? I mean, I know when I was a little tacker, I was learning to read and write at home long before I got to school. And talking to teachers now, that's not happening. And it's certainly not happening on the same scale it was when I was a little boy, which really isn't all that long ago. But I think there's been a tendency in the last decade or so for parents to farm this kind of stuff out to the school. And you simply can't do it. Parents have to take responsibility. Education ministers have to take responsibility for the fact they presided over a failing education system for decades. And ultimately, we all have to take some responsibility and say, enough is enough. We need to do something about it. Because if we continue on this track of spending billions and billions of dollars on a system that doesn't work, we're simply going to slip further. And that's not good for anyone.
A massive challenge now for Prime Minister Scott Morrison, and I think everyone watching this show at home would be absolutely aghast at some of those figures. And I think that COAG, that gets together on a whole range of issues, massive national issues, the first thing COAG should be looking at when it next gets together with its education ministers is these particular statistics. They are very, very ordinary.